There's a lot of excitement for Ole Miss going into this year, and they got a lot of hype and momentum right now because they're coming off their first 11-win season in program history. They return a lot of talent on offense. They had a big transfer portal overhaul on defense. Their defense is the only thing that has kept Ole Miss from being able to be a true contender in the SEC. And it looks like they finally have addressed that problem. They got a bunch of great pass rushers, great cornerbacks. You also have Pete Golding going into his second season as defensive coordinator. And plus, when you look at what they have offensively coming back, Jackson Dart, definitely somebody who should be on a lot of people's Heisman watch list because he probably is the best quarterback in the SEC coming back for this season. He had 31 total touchdowns last season. He's a really good thrower of the football, also a really good runner. Yeah, they did lose a really talented running back to Quinshon Judkins to the transfer portal, but Useless Bentley was also pretty good. They got a really good offensive line. You're stacked at receiver. And they've dominated the transfer portal. Like, how well Ole Miss has used the transfer portal is why they're in the position that they're in going into this season to potentially be able to win the SEC. Like, they got Juice Wells out of the portal, fam. Juice Wells was one of the more underrated wide receivers in the country. And he missed a good amount of action last year because of some injuries and a couple of other concerns off the field. But at South Carolina, he definitely was one of the more underrated receivers. And now going to Ole Miss with Lincoln Riley and Jackson Dart, he's probably going to be in the running to possibly win the Biletnikoff Award this season. So there's so much talent that Ole Miss has offensively that as long as their defense can play at a top 50 level, they're going to be able to compete with the Texases and the Georgias of the world. And they got a really easy schedule. Not only are they going to have a really good team going into this season, but they're going to have one of the easiest schedules out of any team in the SEC this year. They should be 4-0 before they even start conference play. They got to go on the road and play Kentucky. By that point, you should be 4-0. And then you play Kentucky. I said on the road, they play Kentucky at home. Their toughest road game this year is on the road against LSU. And then after your bye week, you got Oklahoma at home, Arkansas on the road, you got Georgia, then you get a bye week before going to the Swamp. And then you get your rival Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl, and you should blow them out because they're not going to be that good this year. Ole Miss, with how well they have utilized the transfer portal and mixing that in with bringing in pretty solid recruiting classes, they're not one of those schools that are always going to recruit at a top 10 level, but they always can be around the 15, 20-ish range, and you mix that in with bringing in not just veteran guys from the portal, but bringing in freshmen, sophomores that still have a few years to develop, you can build up your roster to be good enough to compete for a national championship. We saw this with Florida State. They had a similar formula to what not Lincoln Riley, but Lane Kiffin has used down there in Mississippi. So for Ole Miss, there's no reason why they shouldn't be a contender for the SEC title this year. You got a good quarterback. You got one of the best quarterbacks in the conference, and talent-wise, the gap between you, Georgia, and Texas isn't really that wide. I still would say Georgia has a better roster just because of how well they've recruited. They don't need to utilize the transfer portal. But with how crazy you went in the transfer portal, with how hard you went in the portal this last couple of off seasons, I kind of think that the gap shouldn't be wide enough where you can't finish off Georgia at home. You see, the difference is you had to go on the road and play Georgia last year. They got to come to your backyard and play you. And if you truly are as good as a team as what I believe and a lot of people believe you can be this season, you should be able to beat Georgia at home because elite teams in college football, they win at home. They defend home turf. I'm expecting Ole Miss to be a contender, not only for the SEC, but for the national championship. When I release my top 25 rankings this year, I'm probably going to have them around the top 5, no lower than top 7. This truly is a really good team. They don't really have any weaknesses. They just have concerns. The concerns is Pete Golding going to have a top 50 defense? If you can have that, Ole Miss is going to be really scary this season.